are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards, and my guest today is a first-generation American who learned English in school and then went to law school in her 40s. Our discussion today will focus on a lot of the shifting definition of the American dream. I'm happy to be joined on today's show by my friend, Monica Haft. Monica, welcome to Stories from Real Life.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Monica was born in New York to a mom who came from Bogota, Colombia to visit her family in New York and ended up meeting her future husband, who was a Cuban exile. His family had fled that island country in 1959 with only the clothes on his back. He worked 3 jobs in high school to support his 2 younger brothers. So, Monica, my first question for you is, how did you go from a Spanish-speaking New Yorker to end up in Texas when you were 5 years old?
My dad hated the cold, right? So he grew up on a tropical island, and he got to New York when he was 14. And so by the time he was 20, 21 years old, he'd had it. He did not want to deal with the cold anymore. And he didn't want to raise kids in such a big city. So he was an engineer. I'm very interested in the oil industry. And so he came down here in the early 70s, kind of just looking for something different. And we ended up in Irving, Texas, of all places.
I can understand not liking the cold. I'm a native Texan, but I lived in Maryland for almost 20 years, and I just decided I couldn't take the winters anymore. So I moved back to Texas. After last summer, I'm getting close to thinking I don't want to deal with the summers anymore either.
The summer was bad. Extremes of all kinds, right?
Yes, absolutely. So what was it like for you to have to learn English on the fly while you were already in school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of early childhood memories. We were a pretty broke family. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment there in Irving, 3 little kids. We slept on a trundle bed that became like a king size bed. And then my parents slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room. So it was a little tight at first. And my mom says that I would mimic some English on Sesame Street and things like that. But it wasn't until I started kindergarten. And, this is the early mid 70s. And there was not a big, Latino brown community in suburban Dallas area. So I don't recall seeing any other, Latino-looking or Spanish-looking kids, Spanish-speaking kids for the first several years of elementary school. So I was just very quiet and to myself, very insecure, I remember grabbing my mom's leg and not wanting to go to kindergarten, like her having to peel me off, like all the things, right? But compounded with not knowing the language. But I learned quickly. From all accounts, I understand that I learned quickly.
Did you feel like an outsider at all? Or do you just 100%. Not remember? You did.
Yeah. I mean, just even being 5 or 6 and I do remember being at the parent teacher conference. And I remember, just kind of the disdain in the voice of my first grade teacher, my kindergarten teacher, kind of the disregard of my parents who had thick accents, just a lot of, I absolutely felt like we didn't fit in. And that started to really decrease as my English became perfect by 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. I didn't feel that sense anymore, but certainly my kindergarten, 1st grade years definitely felt like I didn't belong. I didn't have any friends. I don't remember the names of anybody. I was just wanting to learn the language and get by, right?
How did your parents adjust to that for themselves?
Not great. My parents separated when I was in 2nd grade. So they had their own issues, very young parents with a lot of financial stress, 3 kids in 3 years. So by the time they're in their mid 20s, they've got a house full of children. Right. So, my mom worked full time. She worked at the hospital and, my dad worked full time. And so it was just, I think we were all just kind of in survival mode, that whole latchkey kid and Gen X raising themselves. I mean, there's a lot of truth to how that, how we all kind of grew up in the 70s, really.
So, what kind of student were you?
Well, to be honest, probably my entire life until I got to law school. Truly, even through college, I was well liked. I liked my teachers, and I did okay. But I was always one of those students that the teachers would say, if Monica would just apply herself, it would be, there's no end to what she could do. Right? She could be a 4-point honor student and all the things, and I did enough to do better than C's, right? I was an A and B student, but mostly B's, because when the work got too hard, I didn't want to do it anymore. I became very social in my high school years. And so, I for all of my starting out with Spanish, English, and those kinds of social sciences became my favorite topics, and I did the best in those.
So, tell me what your favorite subject was.
Probably any of the histories, right? U.S. history, world history. There was a course that we learned at Irving High, and it was something kind of like, I don't remember what it was. Maybe it's called world geography something, but it was kind of like, the study of cultures all around the world. That really intrigued me. That went into my college years. I was a politics and Latin American studies major and was very interested in not just the U.S. geopolitical landscape, but how it affected the whole world. So yeah, those would be my top ones. I mean, and as soon as it came to mixing numbers with letters, you lost me. You lost me at anything having to do with math that didn't make sense to me at all.
So, did you take sort of a natural interest in Colombia and Cuba? Or was that something that didn't really develop until later? Or has it developed? I guess that's a more precise question.
I know. And that is the real disconnect with being that first generation American. I think that for us, had we remained in New York like my cousins did, that Latin American experience is so much more vibrant for them, because in their neighborhood, there's a strong communities of Colombians, Dominicans, all of the different flavors of Latin America still there in Queens. And then here, I remember my dad basically saying, we're not speaking Spanish anymore. We're not going to be discriminated against. We're going to assimilate. We're done. And so we had such a counter type of reaction and response to our own culture. I don't feel like I was proud of my culture until I became an adult, really. Because it wasn't that we were told to be ashamed of it, but it was something we had to cast off to do okay. Right. And to succeed in my father's mind. And so that's probably why, my kids don't speak any Spanish, and I struggle. I understand a lot and I can communicate, but I would never call myself fluent Spanish speaking, not at this point.
Wow. So have you ever been to Cuba or Colombia?
I have not been to Cuba. My siblings have. I have been to Colombia. The last time I was there, I was 10, and my husband really wants to go. And I think that's some place that we will try to get back to again. My mom struggles to go back and forth in terms of just, now her age, and sometimes the unrest at times makes her a little uneasy to go back. But yeah, I'd love to go. And I mean, more than appreciating my culture, which I wish I were closer to that, as I get older, I really appreciate what my parents had to go through to make sure their kids were educated, that college education was a absolute must in my mother's eyes, and my dad was a little more old fashioned. He thought I could do something else, but mom always was like, you're going to school, you're going to have choices, you're going to have options in life that I didn't have. So more than being tied to my culture, I think I'm really tied to their story, if that makes sense, and kind of more to the hardship part of becoming part of, this great, incredible country that's made up of everybody who came here from everywhere. Which probably is, kind of the empathy part to various aspects of first generation issues and immigration and those kinds of things that I feel interested in. Yeah.
Did they ever tell you any stories about where they came from?
Oh,
Any
for sure.
connection to that family?
Yeah.
What are a couple of stories that you remember that you sort of maybe connected with?
I don't know if I connected, but such a foreign type of life to me is, my mom was raised in convent school. And so, just being raised in this boarding school, even though she lived in the same city, in a school that was, run by nuns, and kind of that whole literally sounds like David Copperfield. The water would be so cold in the morning, they'd have to break it. It'd have ice on it for them to wash their face, just
Wow.
like crazy stories like that. My dad, harder for him to talk about Cuba. His family was separated for the rest of his life. He never saw his father again after he was 14. His dad um, kind of thought the situation would get better. His dad was somewhat sympathetic to the revolution in terms of racial equality and economic equality for people. And he never saw his dad again. So,
Wow.
and my dad's still living at 76 years old or something like that. And he left at 14 and never has had the heart to go back. But, his stories as he's gotten older, being willing to tell stories about, a great grandfather who apparently rode across the island and shot a man who had
Whoa.
defiled his daughter, kind of, tricked her into a relationship. And because my great grandfather was some kind of big man on the island, nobody said anything or did anything, so there's some kind of interesting stories like that. So yeah, we've got some good stories. I'm the tallest woman in our family that anybody knows of on either side.
How tall
Um,
are you?
I'm only 5'9", but I come from,
That's pretty tall.
it's taller than the average person, and certainly tall in my family of, my mom's 5'1", and all of her people are teeny tiny, cute little people. Apparently I look like a great aunt, on the Cuban side. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah, that's something you should flesh out more.
Yes.
Highly suggest that.
Yes, my mom is writing her memoirs, and she's really, really good at it, actually. And it's really painting a picture for, what it was like for her as a child in Bogota, and, the things that she saw and did growing up. Like I said, she was one of seven. So just kind of a different lifestyle. My grandfather was a lawyer, and all the kids were in boarding school, and kind of that was their ethos. And then my dad, their family had a ranch, and how he grew up around, farm animals. He still won't eat chickens because he had to go, and that was his job, was to wring the chicken necks. And he has not, I've never seen him eat chicken ever.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's
He
some
couldn't live in
interesting
South
stories.
United States.
Yeah. Everybody had to wring the chicken neck, right? And eat the chicken after. Yeah.
All right, so you went to college right away after high school,
I did.
but the school wasn't your first choice. So tell me a little bit about your college journey.
Yeah. So, growing up in Irving, which was a great little town actually at the time, I mean, I had a really nice, normal American high school experience, class president, homecoming court, all the fun stuff. Really enjoyed it, had good friends. But I always wanted to leave. I wanted a school with seasons and something different. I mean, and if I'm honest, I was probably, a little bit ambitious and wanted to kind of, flex a little bit and say I went somewhere besides UNT, and, which is where I started. And there's nothing wrong with
By the
that
way,
school.
UNT, for those outside of Texas, is University of North Texas.
That's right. And it's a great school, and I had a great experience there, but I just wanted something different. So I had gone to, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and we used to have these big national conferences, youth conferences. And my junior year in high school, I met a girl who was from Pennsylvania, and she was going to this school that she kept talking about, this Mount Holyoke College. And of course, there was no internet, but she sent me a brochure in the mail, the old fashioned way, and, told me, and they had a riding team, and I didn't ride horses, but it looked so nice, and, all the fall colors, and it just looked amazing. It was an all women's college. And so that set me on my trajectory to go there, but it was also prohibitively expensive. And so I couldn't go my freshman year. I went to UNT, and that was back when you could actually apply to UNT like 2 weeks before the semester started and get in and start college, which is unheard of now, right? Yeah, and I just committed to working 70 hours a week every summer senior year, and then to after my freshman year and sophomore year, and by my junior year, I was able to start there as a junior and graduate from there, which was the goal. So,
What
yeah,
state is that in?
it's in Massachusetts. It's in kind of
Okay.
rural Massachusetts, what they call Western Mass.
Okay. Did you like it?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. It was it's called the Five College Valley. So Smith College is there, and UMass, and Amherst, Hampshire. So we could take classes from the different small colleges, and I was on the writing team and really enjoyed that. So yeah, I loved it. I bet my best friends are still, my girlfriends that we were roommates there at Mount Holyoke.
So how long did it take you to get used to riding horses?
Not long. I was young and agile then. I wasn't
Did people
afraid of
make fun of
breaking
you?
in there.
Did people make fun of you as coming from Texas and not knowing how to ride?
Right. And of course, it was English writing. And so, and one year, the team that kicked everybody's butt that year was from Texas A&M. It was their writing team that killed everybody up in the Northeast, where everyone's used to riding. Or you think of equestrian teams, right? The English riding is seems like more of a Northeastern kind of thing. But yeah, it didn't take long. My roommate happened to be a very accomplished rider since she was 5. And so she would give me private lessons. We could take it as a PE class. And so she had access to the barn. And once you got on the team, you could ride anytime there was free time. So I just rode all the time. I was at the barn all the time.
That sounds a lot like my daughter's story. When she was a senior in college, she took a shooting class. She hadn't ever shot a gun before, and they had a shooting team at her school in Florida. And well, she took the class, and the class was taught by the coach of the shooting team. And
Right.
he said she was a natural. He invited her to join the team. 2 months later, she had qualified for nationals. So
That's amazing.
you never know. You with horses and her with guns, and sometimes you have latent talents that you've never explored before, and have an opportunity to try it for the first time, and just
Right.
a
And
natural fit.
it's when you find that, especially as a young person, when you're not really sure what you can do, it just brings you a lot of joy. And that sense of accomplishment, and that, hey, maybe I do have a talent here. So that's really cool that she is able to do. Does she still shoot?
No, not really. She's got young kids and one with special
Oh,
needs, so she doesn't really have time. But I think she has
gotcha.
a goal of getting back to it eventually.
Yeah, that's good. I tried to ride again this year for the first time in probably, I don't know, 20 years. And I got out there, and I don't know, you get a little older, it seems a little higher off the ground. You think a little more
You got
about what are
farther
the
to fall when you get bucked off. I don't know if they buck and English riding like they do in
Oh,
Western
they
riding.
do. They do. And
Okay.
so when when things like that happen when you're 20, it's not, the consequences don't seem to be the same as when you're in your 50s as
Yeah,
far
the
as pain.
consequences are permanent when you're in your 50s.
Yeah. So I just put my riding hat away and decided that was a nice dream, and I'll just leave that one alone.
Okay. All right. So you met your first husband in Uganda.
I did.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So I was going to a church that was having some, I don't know what you call them, outreach or whatever, to some places kind of in the rural parts of Uganda that were, it was orphanage work, really. So at that time, and I believe it's still the same, it's one of those countries where more than 50% of the population are under 18 years old. And Uganda had been very ravaged by AIDS. And just, there had been some civil war and things like that. So we went, I, with some ladies, went on a trip to go and assist with some different things at an orphanage, and to do some teaching for the women, some basic life skills that they had asked for some help. And then, yeah, my then husband, he went with a completely different church to do completely different things. And we just happened to be there at the same time. And so we met, and then the next year we went back as an engaged couple. And so, yeah, I loved Uganda. Africa is amazing. Africa gets in your blood. It's just an amazing place. At least Eastern Africa, where I was, it's incredible.
Okay. So you eventually got married and had children and became a suburban stay-at-home mom. So
I
what was that
did.
life what was that life like in the Dallas area for you?
I think that it kind of it reached back into those insecurities I had, when I was younger and learning how to speak English. I definitely, there were times, I guess we were very connected to a very large, affluent church. And it wasn't really our choice to start that way. It was very small, and then it just grew. And, it was kind of one of those things. And we had some good friends there and we stayed. But that atmosphere was not easy for me just because, and I'm sure it was self imposed. Nobody was unkind to me, but I didn't feel part of this Highland Park, North Dallas vibe. I stayed at home. We always really, we had everything we needed, but, not go crazy kind of thing. Right. And so, I struggled to feel like I fit in that life. I was really happy with my little babies at home. But then when it came to interacting and kind of doing those moms getting together kind of things, I never quite felt like I fit in with, maybe the kinds of subject matter that they were interested in or things that they wanted to do. I think I started to deal with my own insecurities of what, what that looked like and what maybe I thought they were thinking about me when I'm sure they weren't thinking anything.
It always seems to be that way.
Right.
So what inspired you to become a lawyer?
So at that time, so this would be all of the early 2000s to 2010. I had my 3 kids, so I stayed home with the 3 of them. I homeschooled the first one through 3rd grade. I mean, to be honest, mostly because I just didn't want to have him at elementary school at 7:30. It was so early, and it just felt so ridiculous with my little kids to schlep this poor little kiddo up there for 1st grade. And I'm like, what is 1st grade? It's a little spelling. It's a little, whatever. We could do this. And so we did. And he did great. He's very, very bright. And then my daughter, trying to get her to the school table, also very bright, very verbal child, but something was going on there. She was not picking up reading. And no matter what I did, she was not able to figure that stuff out. And when it came to trying to write, it was really obvious that there was something really unique and different going on there. So, but it started me thinking about law school was just basically trying to get accommodation for my daughter from a public school system that didn't feel like I had taken the proper steps to discuss and look at, what could be going on with her. They didn't like that I got testing that was not, what their approved testing was, even though it was very high quality and state and nationally recognized testing. And I had a friend who was a lawyer, and she wrote a letter for me basically saying, this child is entitled to X, Y, Z. And man, just the quick change in the attitudes, the shift towards us, towards my child and towards her needs. I thought that was really, I don't know, it just really stirred in me. Like, what is this ability to actually get people to take you seriously, or take your issue seriously? And I'd always been kind of a fighter. I'm a middle child, so I'm always kind of like seeing both sides of it and wanting to fix things for the one who's hurt or, explain things to the one who offended. And so that was a big catalyst. And then also just kind of hearing all around me at that time. I think that was the first time in this country that you started to hear all of this stuff about human trafficking and child sexual exploitation and just how rampant it was. There was an organization called International Justice Mission that I started to get interested in. And so, those were the things that started to, reignite in me this desire to go to law school that I had when I graduated from Mount Holyoke. But at that time I had zero money and was, had to put that on the back burner.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some more questions about the human trafficking part, because I know that's one of your passions. So let's talk about law school a little bit more. Sure. Where did you go to law school, and what was that experience like for you?
So, to go to law school, you take the LSAT, and then you start getting, I guess if you get a certain type of score, and I was really thankful I got it. It was, it wasn't Elwood's score, but it was a good score. You start getting a bunch of brochures from people, and, so law schools I'd never heard of started contacting me. And so I got, I was very interested in international human rights as well. And I got a brochure from a college or a university called Regent University in Virginia Beach. Never heard of it in my life. A little third tier school, accredited, but I didn't know who they were. Um, and as I, went through the process with them, I thought, what the heck? Because they sent a brochure about international human rights, and they had this study abroad program in Strasbourg. They had all of these really cool things going on, and so I applied, and they offered me a 60% scholarship, like right off the bat. And I don't know if you know anything about how expensive law school is, but it's ridiculous. And with three little kids, it had to work. It had to fit, right? We couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
SMU was not working out for me. I was waitlisted. I would have had to do the night program. It would have taken me 4 years. And this school comes along and says, "Come on, let's go." And found a great little school for the kids. Professors were really, really family oriented, willing to do a lot of things for the moms. The moms with kids in the law school weren't treated like they shouldn't be there. And that was really, really important to me. I really liked that. Yeah. So we sold our house and we loaded the kids up and we drove to Virginia Beach and we all started law school together.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. It was terrifying, to be in such a pressure environment. Your first year of law school is, it's just the nonstop work. I think I had an edge having had been a mother, having had 3 children and understanding in my mind what's really a priority, what's worth the anxiety and what isn't, and school's not easy. And I'm not saying it is, but it's kind of like, okay, you don't have a child who's in horrible illness or doing badly. Like this is just school. And so it helped me keep my perspective because law school can turn you into a freak, as far as the anxiety and all of that. But, I loved it. I loved being treated like, an equal with these really brilliant people. I don't know about equal, but like your thoughts mattered and they wanted to hear what you had to say. And they felt the staff and the faculty were incredible about, I really believe they were invested in the outcome, what their product was. And that was us. So it was a really great time. I went to Strasbourg. The whole family went for the summer, studied abroad there. We went to Manchester, England. I did an anti-human trafficking charity work there for a summer. So it was a great experience.
Did you like Virginia, the state
Loved
itself,
it.
or in Virginia Beach?
Loved it. The first year we were there, I mean, you were in Maryland, like there, and I don't know how close you were to the coast, but this is the prairie, right? There's just slight hills and no water unless dynamite and backhoes made the lake, right? There's just not a lot of natural type of water here in the middle of North Texas. So it took some time to get used to the fact that we were 8 feet above sea level and there was water everywhere, right? Tunnels under the Atlantic, under the Chesapeake, it's all of that. The first 6 to 8 months, all of us just thought, what the heck are we doing here? This is the strangest place. And after that year, we just fell in love with it. We loved that kind of coastal environment. Felt a lot less materialistic than Dallas. We didn't go to the mall. We didn't care. It's so nice outside. It's not your only thing to do, right? You can do things in North Texas, sadly. And as you know, with that kind of heat, you're either in the water or you're at the mall. There's just not a lot to do.
Someplace in the air conditioned.
Right. And when you have, albeit incredibly muggy temperatures, but you're so close to the water, you're close to mountains, it's just a different lifestyle, and it kind of helps you. It freed me anyway from kind of feeling like like if I wasn't, that it was okay to be outside and enjoy that. And it wasn't like what am I trying to say? Like a planned trip. Like it was just life. You were just, there was a trail and it was beautiful and it led to the beach. How nice is this? It wasn't a vacation. It was just the way we lived. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time in Virginia Beach. My son, when he was in high school, was a very competitive baseball player, eventually played in college. But baseball in Virginia Beach was extremely competitive.
Oh.
And so he would play in like tournaments and showcase events in Virginia Beach, and I'd go there. And my favorite part about going to Virginia Beach wasn't necessarily the beach, although I did like that. I did like being able to fish in salt water. It was that they had Bluebell ice cream, which they didn't have it anywhere in Maryland. They had it in Virginia Beach, though.
That's really interesting. That's interesting. You know, another thing that I noticed and I really, really liked it, especially for my kids, was ironically how much more integrated that area seemed to me. And I don't know if it was because of the military installation and how much of that was people from all over the world or all over the country. But in terms of like and this is going to sound weird, but I think you'll know what I'm coming from the suburbs where it's very homogenous in lots of ways, can be, to being in an environment that I felt was a lot more normal and what I would hope is normative in terms of integration of, you know, African American professionals like our dentist and the doctor and whoever. And it just was like, I don't feel like in Dallas for us or in the suburbs, I didn't feel like that was what I was seeing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like in Virginia Beach, it was just much more normative to have just average. I don't know, that it just seemed more appropriately integrated. I don't know how else to explain that, but
Yeah,
I
military
really like
towns are interesting. I visited a military town the first time. It's like the late '80s, and went to a church on a near military base, and it was entirely different races. Hadn't ever seen that before in a church.
yeah,
It looked like what you think America should be
right,
represented,
right.
how it should be represented.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. It was just like I realized that everywhere I went, it was just more of like it's all the people, all the different kinds of people, not just the homogenous urban, waspy type of people. And I loved that. I loved that for my kids. I wanted them to see that this is what we think is normal. This is what should be the norm, And so I really appreciated that and liked that about Virginia and Virginia Beach.
Yeah, my son lives in Virginia now, and
Oh,
he's
really?
yeah, and he's getting married in May, and his fiance
Oh,
is from Virginia, sort of. Her dad was in the military, but I think
right.
she spent most of her time in Virginia.
Yeah, that
But
whole
he likes it
Martha.
there.
Yeah, it's just I really enjoyed that part of. I loved all of it. I'd move back to Virginia Beach in a heartbeat if that made sense in my life. Who knows? Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. So,
Yeah.
what type of law do you currently practice?
So I had all these big dreams to do all this European stuff and really, the International Court of Human Rights. All of those things seemed like such a that was the place to go, but honestly, just in my life stage. And that was the reality, right? I went to law school after I had 3 children and they were priority one. And it was just, there was never an avenue to get me into that kind of work that wouldn't completely, probably be detrimental in their lives in some way. So, unless you go to Harvard, Yale, one of the top 10, honestly, your first law or your first job out of law school is truly just whatever you can get, right? You have no experience. You have nothing to offer in a world that's all, you're measured by your billable hours and all of that. So my first job, I took the Tennessee bar, was the first bar that I took. And that was because my then husband's family were there and we were thinking, maybe that'd be a great place to get started and raise the kids. So I took the Tennessee bar, got in with her husband's little law firm and started practicing everything. They were a boutique firm. Moved back to Virginia quickly, took the Virginia bar exam, but we didn't stay. Next year, we moved to Texas, took the Texas bar exam. So I took 3 bar exams in 3 years for 3 different jurisdictions.
Wow.
I don't recommend that. So we landed in Texas back in 2015. And so my first job as a licensed attorney was with a medical malpractice defense firm. And in my world, we call it liability defense or insurance defense, which I think is a misnomer because it sounds like I'm defending the insurance company and I'm not. Anybody who has a liability policy that, homeowners, an auto, you own a business, anything where you have insurance policy, and as you're supposed to protect you from anybody claiming you were negligent. That's the work I do. So I defend the homeowner that somebody says that, their dog bit them and they're being sued. Somebody, an auto accident, a slip and fall at a salon or a grocery store. I will defend that small business or that homeowner. That's what we do. And that's what I've been doing since I became a lawyer here in Texas since 2016. That's solely the work I've been doing.
Okay, so now let's get back to your passion for halting the scourge of human trafficking.
Yeah.
How has your law background allowed you to become involved in that movement?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that, actual law practice, and that was just one of the heartbreaking realities that I had to deal with. And that is, in the United States, the government brings those suits, period. And so if you don't work for the government, you don't get to be part of those criminal prosecutions. So the next tier down was, well, what about civil actions against traffickers? Take their stuff, right? Get them where it hurts, take their money. Restitution type of things. But that was still just such if you could imagine what a tiny field that is, right? Because in this country, the actual victim is the only one who can sue. And that was one of the reasons why the European law was so appealed to me, is because over there, an organization can stand in the shoes of the victims. So if it's an organization that protects trafficking victims, they can actually bring a lawsuit.
Okay.
But you can't do that here. So to just stay in touch. So I think that more than anything, the law degree and the background where I have found my niche is not so much in law practice, but in connecting people. And so there have been numerous opportunities based on my time in Manchester and the people I met when I did a work study in London and those kinds of things. There have been many opportunities that I'm really grateful for, where I've gotten to kind of collaborate, speak more to the American side of some issues, maybe for a British nonprofit or a European nonprofit that's kind of wondering, maybe asking things about the condition of children on the border, migrant children, what's going on with that? What can you speak to? So maybe talking about that, or just, meeting fantastic people. I love, love, love to connect people. So meeting somebody and knowing that this other person who's qualified and could do that work, is looking for a place there. And so really I've kind of become the, the unsanctioned personal mini LinkedIn for people and causes that I care about. And so I'm really grateful for that. But I work with the international law section of the state bar. And we do some stuff with the Human Rights Committee. And so I'm on that committee, and, to the best of whatever my talents and time fit in, if we have an initiative, some kind of awareness thing or a proposition to bring before the Texas State Legislature, or, just some kind of, we have a newsletter, call for articles about the subject matter, then that's what role I would play nowadays.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're winding down this conversation. I just have a couple questions left. In the intro, I talked about how we would discuss the American dream and the shifting definition of that term.
Right.
So tell me how you would define the American dream from the perspective of a woman who has seen some things.
Seen some things. I think that, and I still think, and I can only speak for myself. I do think that having been to some different places, a very distinctive opportunity that pretty much anybody can have here is access to education. And what I'm talking about is specifically is higher education. And it could just be community college, and you might have to bust your butt at Applebee's or wherever else to get there. But we have options that most people only dream of. And, and it's a first pathway, trade school, whatever it is. And even though I am fully aware that there are some institutional problems, with just, discrimination, all that, I get that. But I also know that even if school A, for whatever reason, says no, there's school B. And it may not be your dream, but it's an avenue and it's something you can do. And I think I really believe, and I've seen it in my life and in the life of so many people, some precious people that have been, that I've seen come in and migrate from or immigrate from several different countries, Asian countries, African countries, whatever, is the access to, you can get started. It might be a humble 2 classes at such and such county junior college, but you can get going. And it might take longer than it takes the average American person, but you can get there too. And that's, to me, that's what I've seen, is I'm still hopeful, even though I think that there's a lot of dumpster fire messes out there right now. You and I talk about and tweet about,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still hopeful that there's lots of really good opportunities. Not easy, but I think easier and more accessible than a lot of places. So I'm still down with the American dream. I think that whatever that means to you, I think it's unfortunate for me, it's our pathway, and it didn't have to be, and it wouldn't be now, but our pathway was kind of having to let go of the past and let go of where we came from for a bit. I think that's sad. I regret that. I don't think that's necessary nowadays. Maybe it's probably a little bit different for some folks. But we circle back, right? We circle back, and the language has become more important to me. The stories, where my people came from, what they went through always stays with me. Now that always stays with me. And now it's just the challenge of helping my kids connect to that and not feel disconnected. Their dad's redheaded Irish descent. They're very, can't tell that they've got that full half Latin blood, really, but they're interested. And so I think the American dream is, how do I get to my own personal goals? How do I incorporate what my people have done for me and how they've helped me get there? And how do I pass that on to the next generation so that they have some tie to that and some appreciation to that?
Okay. Excuse me. Last question here. What's the best part about being an American?
I mean, let's be honest, an American in the South, let's be real specific, because we're going to talk about all the food. No, that's my favorite. Being raised in this great state where chicken fried steak and black eyed peas and mashed potatoes, that's probably my favorite thing. But the best part of being, gosh, that's a really hard question, Melvin, because my heart's so torn about daily events and current events that are so hard, and it's hard to be hopeful. But I'm going to stay hopeful, and I'm going to end on a hopeful note. And I think that that's, at the end of the day, God willing, being the best part of being an American is being part of an ethos and a mindset that people matter, their rights matter, respect matters. And these are the things that, keep this country, keep us, I think, different than lots of places, not all places. There's a lot of places that do it better than we do, but it's for such a diverse group of people. It's the hope that those of us who are always hoping for better and for more inclusion in a way that, lifts up, that I think that at the end of the day, the best part of being an American for me is hoping and believing that mindset is going to prevail and keep us going forward to more, inclusion, awareness, respect. That's what I'm hoping for.
And liberty and chicken fried steak
and
for all.
And chicken fried steak for all. Amen.
Well, that's a perfect place to end this episode. So our guest today has been attorney Monica Haft. Monica, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Melvin.
That's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go. That was Stories from Real Life with your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. See you then.